Hello everybody, my name is Zeke. Welcome to my channel. Today's video is a very special one and one I've been looking forward to making for a while, and that's because I'm going to be recommending books based on my favorite albums. I listen to a lot of music, and I also collect a lot of albums on vinyl. So I'm kind of planning on going through some of my favorite albums, and I picked out some books that kind of make me think about the albums, or books that I thought of when I was thinking about the albums, for various reasons. Some of them are more serious than others, but this is really just for fun, and I just think it's a really interesting thing because these are probably the two things I love most in my life: listening to music and reading books, and I thought it'd be fun to relate them. And I was also thinking I might, in the future, hopefully relatively soon, go through my TBR and read books on my TBR that I think will remind me of these albums and kind of see how that goes. So this might be a series in the making that might be coming up soon. But for now, I'm just gonna go through each album, talk about why I like the album, and then I'm gonna say why I chose the book that I did, explain the book, and that'll be that. So the first album I want to talk about is Titanic Rising by Wise Blood. This is an album from 2019. It's very, I think, haunting and beautiful. It's, I want to say, alternative pop, but it's not really poppy. It's more kind of singer-songwriter-y with really amazing production that I really think is just so beautiful and so atmospheric. And this is one of my favorite albums just because I think it's so beautiful, and the lyrics and the songwriting really draw you in and transport you to an entirely different world, which I think is definitely represented by this incredible cover. I don't know how well you can see it, but basically Wise Blood recreated her room, her childhood bedroom, and plunged it underwater and did a photo shoot in that submerged bedroom for this album cover, and I think it's a really, really cool one. So that's why I love that album so much. And the book I chose to pair with it is a bit of an odd choice, I think, but that's Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. And I have this really beautiful Folio Society edition of it. Basically, in Rebecca, we follow this woman who is newly married to this man who lives in this amazing, incredible, beautiful mansion called Manderley. And he had a past wife named Rebecca. And as this woman moves in, she's feeling a little out of place, and she feels like there's something going on. It's very mysterious, very haunting, very beautiful, with descriptions of kind of the house. The house really feels like a character. That's a big thing. Also very atmospheric and really draws you in. And so that's why I decided to pair this with Titanic Rising. And I also just really love the book. So that's the first recommendation. Next up, I'm going to talk about When the Pawn by Fiona Apple. That's a shortened version of the name because the name of the album is this really long poem of which I know every single word, but I'm not going to recite because that'd be really boring and we'd be here for a while. And I don't have it on vinyl, but I wish I did. But When the Pawn is kind of, I'd say, alternative rock singer-songwriter fare from 1999. And this album really expanded my music taste when I first started really listening to music. It kind of brought me out of, at the time I was really only listening to music from the past decade or so, and really made me expand what I was listening to. And it's a very emotional album. It has a very good mix of slower, sadder songs and really intense and angry music. And I chose a kind of silly pairing for this one just because I thought it was funny. But My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Otessa Moshfegh. This book, we follow a main character who is really depressed and kind of hates everything and everyone, and decides that she wants to induce herself into a coma for a year. And I chose this book because I think that the main character would definitely listen to Fiona Apple and relate in the wrong way and take Fiona Apple and make it her whole personality. She would definitely be a Fiona Apple fan, but for all the wrong reasons. And for that reason, I think this would be a really funny book to read if you really enjoy Fiona Apple in general or When the Pawn as an album. Next up, I want to talk about Melodrama by Lorde. I'd say this is the first album I really loved with all my heart. This is a pop album from 2017 about being young and exploring being young and going out and partying, and also the sad moments, heartbreak, just all of the things, if we're being honest. And some really cool production stuff on this, some really beautiful songs on this, and really just made me love music, I'd say, and just at the time was very inventive for me and one of the coolest things I'd ever heard. I think I've listened to a lot more music now, so I definitely expanded what I think is experimental. This is not an experimental album, but there is a song with a interlude in it that is just sounds of metal screeches, and at the time for me that was revolutionary. So really love this album. It did a lot for me and still does a lot for me. But the book I'm gonna recommend with it is a book I read early on this year called Happy Hour by Marlo Granados. And this is a book also about being young, about moving to the city and the ups and downs of that, and the hardships and the fun times. And it really did remind me of Melodrama. I just think they're very similar in a lot of ways, for obvious reasons. I mean, you have young protagonists, or Lorde, who is a real person, who's kind of just experiencing life as a person in their early 20s and all that entails. So I think they really pair well together. Okay, next up I have Either Or by Elliott Smith. For me, this was hard because I love Elliott Smith. He's probably one of my favorite artists, and choosing one of his albums for me is very hard because I love them all dearly, and it was really between this and his self-titled album, but I just decided to make the easy decision and go with Either Or, which is also probably his most popular album. But Elliott Smith is a singer-songwriter, or he's dead now. He was a singer-songwriter who wrote very sad music, and just incredible lyricist, but really depressing music in general. And this album in particular, I think, just has such a depressing tone throughout it, that I really love. And it's just a really good album to listen to when you are sad. And the book I chose to recommend for this album is Severance by Ling Ma. And this is kind of a weird choice, but I feel like in Severance, we're following a main character as kind of the end of the world happens. It's a pandemic story, but it's a very low pressure, not a lot of action. A lot of this book we're just spent with this main character as she's trying to go about her life in the city, and kind of just really, she's depressed in a lot of ways. She's not living a great life, and she kind of devolves into solitude at a lot of points in this book, and just being inside her mind and feeling this kind of loneliness that she feels throughout a lot of the book really reminds me of Either Or by Elliott Smith. And so even though these are obviously two very different kind of ideas, obviously, because this is about a pandemic, I just think that the tone is very similar at a lot of parts in this book, and that's why I chose it. Next up, I have a very new album from last year called Janky Star by Grace Ives, and this is kind of an alternative pop album that's really, I feel like, fresh and exciting, and the production is insane on it, and I think every single song just hits so hard, and they're very short songs, but they're quite beautiful, quite new, and when I first listened to this album, I just could not stop listening to it on repeat for days on end. And the book I decided to pair with it is Nothing to See Here by Kevin Wilson, because I think, like Janky Star, it's a very fresh and innovative book. I mean, this is really like nothing else I've ever read in my life. It's very weird, very strange, and at the time that I read it, I just thought it was very fresh and a really good break from reading other more serious stuff. So in this book, we follow this woman who is going to kind of babysit, look after these two kids who have the problem of spontaneously combusting. So obviously a very weird premise, and I just think it's very funny, it's very fun, but there's also important messages of found family and stuff like that in here. And I think it's a really good book, and because of its kind of freshness and newness. It really reminded me of Janky Star. Next, I'm going to talk about Vesper Teen by Bjork. This is a art pop, electronic inspired album from 2001. And I love this album a lot because of the production, how influential it was for me for expanding what music I listen to. Once again, a lot of my favorite albums are my favorite albums because of how they impacted me, not just through the music, but in my life. And this really expanded my taste in what kind of music I listen to. And I just think it's a really beautiful record. And it was very innovative at the time. It has a lot of like micro beats and stuff, and it was really meant to be played on really crappy early 2000s MacBook speakers. And it's just a really cool album and a really beautiful album that I love quite a lot. And I decided to pair it with On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. This book is kind of written as a letter from a son to a mother who can't read, so the main character knows his mother will never read it, but it's written in a very poetic style because Ocean Vuong is a poet, and it's just a really beautiful story. He talks about his childhood. It's not technically about the author, but there are autobiographical elements to it, even though it is fiction. It talks about race, it talks about sexuality in just a really poetic way, and very beautifully and very lyrically. And it really reminds me of Vesper Teen because of kind of this lyrical and beautiful and atmospheric prose and writing style, and talking about love and sexuality, which is something that is really prevalent throughout Vesper Teen as well. Next, I'm going to talk about Norman fucking Rockwell by Lana Del Rey. This is a 2019 kind of alternative pop album as well, a lot of alternative pop, but this album is grand, it's sweeping, it's her magnum opus, very Americana kind of atmosphere, really beautiful songwriting, really poignant songwriting, and really sums up who Lana Del Rey is. And I just think this is her best work, and she won't ever top it, but that's okay because this is a great album. And I chose East of Eden by John Steinbeck to go with it, which is kind of an odd choice as well because this is a very large classic. I think this is the biggest classic I've ever read, but it's also probably one of my favorite books I've ever read. Just a really time-consuming, but also it spans a long period of time, and it's very sweeping. It takes place in California and just tells this really epic tale of two families, of brothers, of this whole kind of area, and just is very grand and epic. And that's why I kind of paired it with Lana Del Rey, also because an American classic and the Americana vibes, and also California. There's a song called California on the album, and this takes place in California. So there are just too many connections for me to not do this. Okay, next I want to talk about another 2022 album. That's Dragon Newer Mountain, I Believe in You by Big Thief. This is a very strange album. It's 20 songs, it's huge, and it's not really one genre. I mean, they do a lot of alternative rock-ish, folky stuff. I mean, the Adrian Lenker, who's the singer in this band, does a lot of solo work that is folk music, but this album is really an eclectic mix of a lot of different genres, and I think basically every single song in here is perfect, and it really builds, even though there's these individual moments, it really builds a kind of full experience. And for that reason, I decided to pair it with How High We Go in the Dark by Sequoia Nagamatsu. Similarly, this is a very weird pick as well, because this is about a kind of pandemic plague situation as well, but this is a collection of basically short stories that tell tales from different periods of time, different characters that kind of build to this tapestry of what happened, but it's not fully explained, but they build to this grander book. And so that's very similar to me to how Big Thief blends genres on Dragon Newer Mountain, I Believe in You, even if thematically there's not much in common, I gotta say, but just kind of that building a larger body of work based on smaller and loosely connected pieces just really relates the two to me in my mind. Okay, I have two more to talk about. First, I'm going to talk about Sprained Ankle by Julian Baker. I do not own this on vinyl. I really wish I did, but I don't. And Sprained Ankle is a really, really depressing album. I just think it's probably the saddest music I've ever listened to, and it's about going through a tough time in life, going through a lot of different terrible things like addiction, and for that reason I decided to pair it with The Woman Destroyed by Simone de Beauvoir, because this book is also about a lot of different characters going through really tough situations with basically all unhappy endings. This really reminds me tonally of Sprained Ankle. This is a looser one, but I just thought that they're both pretty sad, and they're both about going through tough situations. So that's why I chose to pair them together. Next up, I have an album called Bury Me at Makeout Creek by Mitski. This is kind of an alternative soft rock album from 2014 that I really love. Just because it's very short. It's only about a little more than half an hour, but it packs a really big punch. It has a lot of sad songs, a lot of angry songs, and is really about, once again, like Sprained Ankle, going through a lot in life and kind of having to navigate through that. And for that reason, I decided to pair it with another weird pick, which is The Vegetarian. This book is very strange. It's about a woman who decides to be a vegetarian, and it's not told from her perspective. We get 3 different perspectives surrounding her throughout the book, and she's kind of ostracized, and there's weird stuff going on as well. Some speculative stuff, some supernatural stuff. But I think the main point is she's really ostracized from society. She's attacked, she's put on display, and has to go through all this stuff just because she's a vegetarian. And I feel like that relates to this album because it's about suffering and exploitation and pain, of which the main character in The Vegetarian goes through a lot of. So that was a fun video to make. Those are the books that I've decided to pair with my favorite albums, some recommendations if you've listened to the albums, or if you've read some of those books, maybe some albums to go check out. And I hope, as I said, to continue this as some sort of series in the future. But I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe if you want. I try to post videos once a week. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less, and I will see you in the next one.